Okay, we're ready.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Great to see everyone. I'll call this meeting to order, and I've got 10:03 on my computer. And Alicia, you want to run us through the roll call?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Kaur. Before we get started, just remember to keep yourself muted unless you're speaking. And then once we do the votes, please turn on your camera and then unmute yourself. Okay, so roll call. Member Baker.
Present.
Member Broussard.
Present.
Member Burton.
Here.
Dr. Kaur.
Here.
Superintendent Hoffman.
Here.
Member Kay.
Here.
Dr. Mack.
Here.
Dr. Robbins. Member Ruiz.
Present.
Member Wellborn.
Here.
President Narducci. You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you so much, Alicia. And we will start with the president's report. And as you notice, President Narducci is not with us this morning, so there is no report. And with that, I'll move on to the superintendent's report and hope to hear from Superintendent Hoffman and hopefully a student. That's always a highlight. Superintendent Hoffman.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vice President Kaur, board members. Good morning, everyone. I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the different native lands that we occupy today. My own home sits on the O'odham and Hohokam lands. So first to start, roughly 2 weeks ago, Governor Ducey issued Executive Order 2021-04, mandating that schools open by the first Monday after their spring break, or if they do not have a scheduled spring break, then by March 15th, which was last Monday. While this timeline presented challenges for some of our schools, the vast majority were already planning to expand or transition to in-person learning. With proven and layered mitigation strategies like mask wearing and social distancing, our schools have been effective in limiting the spread of COVID-19 within their campuses. And while spread within our communities and families remains a concern, greater access to the vaccine, particularly within the education community, with many in our workforce vaccinated, means that our schools are safer. ADE has offered resources to schools to operate safely for the remaining months of this year, of the school year, including compiling CDC resources into one toolkit with resources for parents, teachers, and families. That toolkit can be found on our website. Additionally, we have weekly calls with school leaders where our local leaders present strategies that they have found successful while operating in-person or hybrid models. As more schools expand full-time to in-person learning, additional fiscal assistance from the American Rescue Plan will help them to maintain healthy learning environments and target expanded learning opportunities to help our students recover from a challenging year. In addition, to help our schools and students, ADE was proud to support the Arizona Department of Economic Security to reintroduce the Pandemic Electronic Benefit Transfer, or PEBT, benefits to Arizona families. As too many families have struggled with food and economic insecurity over the past year, ADE is thankful that the PEBT program will provide assistance for eligible students and families across the state. Families should reach out to DES directly with questions or concerns about PEBT payments. More information can be found on the Arizona Department of Economic Security's website. In addition, I'd like to share that ADE is soliciting feedback on proposed revisions to Arizona's Essa Plan. The Essa State Plan is the state's response to the Every Student Succeeds Act, the federal law that allows the U.S. government to support both national and local education goals with grants and other resources. The Essa Plan describes how Arizona identifies schools for support and improvement, and it also outlines Arizona's system to make sure that every student leaves 12th grade ready for college and career. It reflects input from a variety of Arizona's education stakeholders and it was developed in the school year 2016-2017 and received full federal approval in September of 2017. It was also amended to revise accountability components in 2019, and those modifications were approved in January of 2020. Our Arizona Essa Plan is being revised because ADE has made key changes that are reflected in the revised plan. Our agency has a renewed focus on equity, like our vision statement, equity for all students to achieve their full potential. We've established an educator recruitment and retention team, and we've identified current initiatives supported through these federal programs. It's also been 4 years since the initial implementation, and Arizona has had an opportunity to reflect and adjust. We encourage school leaders and stakeholders, including our State Board of Education board members, to register for an upcoming webinar to provide feedback. More information can be found on our ESSA website, which is at azed.gov/ESSA, ESSA. The webinar will also be recorded and posted to our website for those who cannot attend. And last, I would like to, this is the best part for me, which is that for each board meeting, we invite our student advisors from the ADE Student Advisory Council to present on topics that are important to them. It's a great opportunity for us to hear directly from students, and today we have one student, Zarin Hattery. I'll turn it over to you, Zarin.
Superintendent, it looks like he is not currently here.
Oh no, is Sierra on the call?
Yes, Sierra is here.
Sierra, have you heard from Zarin?
Hi, Superintendent. I've tried to reach out to him a few times this morning and have been unsuccessful to reach him. So yes, I'm not sure if he's planning on joining us today.
Okay, well, I hope he's okay, and I'm sorry that that was the only student we had scheduled for today. So with that, I will conclude my superintendent's report.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Hoffman. And with that, I will move on to 1C, and that's the Executive Director's report. Executive Director Williams, you have a report this month?
Vice President, core members of the board, I do not have an Executive Director's report this month.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'll move on
Vice
to the call.
President Core?
Yeah.
I see that Member Wellborn has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, and thank you for that. I struggle with all the boxes and everything else, so I appreciate the help there. And Member Wellborn.
Thank you, Vice President, core members of the board, Superintendent. We're trying to learn this technology without interrupting ourselves, so I appreciate the heads up. My question, Superintendent, is if you can share with the board any information that you have or plans that are in the works on how this new round of funding from the bailout pandemic program that Congress passed and how it's being, I know you're working with the governor on this, but if you could share any kind of update on what kind of priorities you expect to be funding with this new round of funds.
Absolutely, so this is our third round of receiving COVID recovery and relief funding. So in many ways, the priorities will be very similar, and we're continuing to make announcements around that. But I do want to make clear that 90% of the funds from the American Rescue Plan, similar to ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, that 90% of that is allocated through the federal formula that is set by Congress. So then ADE has the other 10% of discretionary funding to work with for special initiatives, and that's where we partner with other agencies and organizations. And I'm happy to provide the board with a compiled list of all the different initiatives that we've already funded using our federal relief funding, and then continue to keep you apprised as we update that. But for the majority of the funding, the bulk of it will be ADE will be a pass-through, and it is the LEAs are funded through the Title I formula. So just wanted to make that clear to the board, but I will definitely update you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wellborn and Superintendent Hoffman. Any other questions, comments? Okay, then I will move on to item 2, And this is the call to the public. This is the time for the public to comment on items not on today's agenda or on the consent portion of the agenda. And I believe we have a few folks willing to speak, desiring to speak, so we'll limit them, if you would, to 3 minutes. Alicia, do we have some folks for this call to the public?
Vice President Court, no, not for number 2, but we have 6 for number 4.
I jumping the gun. Okay, then we'll move right on to the aforementioned consent agenda. I believe there was a request to pull item 3B from the consent. Is there anyone else who desires to have any of the consent agenda items pulled for discussion other than 3B that's been pulled? Hearing none, then, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 3A and 3C through 3J?
So moved.
Thank you. Was that member K?
Yes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think I have a second, third, and fourth. Who wants to claim the first, second?
I believe it was member Burton with the second, Dr. Core.
By a whisker only. Very good, though. So member Burton with the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Again, cameras on and unmuted. Please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, very good. Again, we will now circle back to motion carries. Obviously, we'll circle back to item 3B. What's the approach here? Do I need a motion and second, then we discuss?
No, you do not, Dr. Core.
Okay.
So we'll just talk about 3B as if it's a regular agenda item. And we have Audra from the Department of Education who's here to ask or to answer any questions that board members may have on item 3B, which is the approval of the of a speaking portion for the statewide grade 3 English language arts assessment. So Audra.
Good morning, Vice President Core, members of the board. I received some questions that pertain to this board agenda item. And so I don't know if someone would like to ask them or if I should just respond to them.
Audra, why don't you go ahead, if you will, and just give us a summary of the agenda item, and then we can go for questions.
Perfect. So a summary of this board agenda item was to address the need for providing more information and making the third grade reading ELA assessment more robust, because it is used as our move on when reading indicator. And so when we wrote the RFP, now I think it's almost 2 years ago now, there was a request to add in an option for the grade 3 English language arts assessment. And we worked with the awarded vendor, which was Pearson, to address that concern. And their proposal was to address a speaking portion or measuring oral reading fluency. And so their proposal is to add that piece in. And that would be a part of the new third grade English language arts assessment. We would field test items this first year, so spring of 2022, next year is our first year of the actual contract. And we would field test items to be used for the oral reading fluency indicator. And then at that point, because the assessment has changed and this part has been added, we would need to set new cut scores for all of the third grade reading, and then possibly the third grade move on when reading cut as well.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want more information or not. Just that it's adding this one piece would add about 15 to 20 minutes to this third grade part of the reading English language arts assessment.
Thank you, Audra, and open it up to the members for anyone who might have a question or comments, thoughts on 3B. Please, Member Baker. Yeah, please.
Dr. Core and members,
it adds about 15 minutes, but all the students can't be given it at the same time. So what is the actual increase in time, in teacher time to administer the test?
Vice President Kaur, Member Baker, members of the board. So the proposal is that's the total time, but we are recommending that they can do this in small groups. So 6 students at a time can be doing this online. We currently do a very similar model on our Azella assessment, where we have a speaking portion. So it's not measuring oral language fluency, it's measuring speaking for our English language proficiency assessment. But they do about 6 students at a time, depending on the size of the room. So we do recommend, have recommendations for the size of the room, the spacing of the students. So it does not have to be done individually.
Okay. So just to clarify, so if a teacher has, for example, a room of 30 students, it's 15 minutes for each group of students in terms of teacher time.
That would be correct for the assessment.
Okay. And what is the implications for expense? Is the vendor charging additional for this? And then secondarily, do schools have to purchase additional equipment?
Because we currently use this same model in Azella, most schools have the headsets. There is a recommended or a requirement for the kind of headset that should be used. And so most schools have these if they're administering Azella assessment, so they could use those. And then in addition to that, you asked about the cost of overall. This was always intended to be an option. So once it was approved by the board, we would have to add this to our contract as an option. And for year 1, where we would develop the items, field test them, we would work on that, setting the cut for that 3rd grade test again. It comes in about 400, hold on, let me see, I have my notes here. It was about 400 and, hold on, give me 1 second. $443,811,000 for year 1. And after year 1, so in years 2 through 7, the remainder of the contract, it's about $250,000 a year to maintain that piece and scoring of that part of the assessment.
And one other question, when this is all complete, who owns the test? Is it owned by the vendor or is it owned by the state?
It's owned by the state. So the data that is generated from that is owned by the state. Pearson cannot use it for any other components of anything that they do. The items will be developed specifically for Arizona, and they will belong to Arizona.
Okay, I appreciate the additional information. I think those issues are all important issues, and I support I agree with you that this does make the test more robust. I was just concerned to make sure that the test would indeed belong to Arizona, and concerned about the additional time for teachers. I hope there's some kind of a mechanism to assist schools that do not have that equipment and will need to purchase it, because obviously that's a significant detail, if you will, that needs to be taken care of.
Thank you, Member Baker. Any other member with Dr. Mack?
Yeah, thank you. So Audra, I'm just curious, I was trying to gather that with the conversation with Member Baker, it sounds like it's not a computer adaptive, is that true?
Member Mack, that is correct. It is not true. None of our assessments are computer adaptive. I think we've always included language that someday we would like to get to that point, but we need to build up our item bank of Arizona specific items significantly in order to have a computer adaptive assessment.
All right, and I guess along with Member Baker's concern is that with the Zella testing, I know districts hire additional staffing just to run those tests. So even though we can do it in groups, it's not classroom teachers doing it. It's additional staffing oftentimes that is hired, and that's an additional expense, just something to consider. My main question though and concern is I'm concerned about the redundancy and how this test might work with other measures of oral reading fluency that are already in place. And I know teachers would not want to repeat the same test and just get another result. And, you know, the only difference being that this is added to some statewide bank of data, because spring, you know, as you know, with the universal screeners, we do the DIBELS assessment. Let's say the district uses DIBELS, they do oral reading fluency in the spring. This would be a double measure. And that begs a lot of questions, such as, what if there are conflicting results? And then they're submitting this data also to ADE, right? And so I'm wondering, has that conversation come up and how will that be handled? Along with the unintended consequence of an extreme focus on kids just reading fast, you know? So I just, you know, so I just want to make sure, and then yeah, so I'll just stop there for now, but yeah.
Vice President Kaur, members of the board, Member Mack, those conversations have started to happen. This is like the first step in the process is, do we want to even move forward with something like this? I worked collaboratively with K-12 Standards, Sean Ross and his team to even develop this board agenda item and the language, and we would be working closely with them, as well as our Arizona assessment TAC. Those are our national experts that provide guidance to us and advice for our statewide assessments. And we have, you know, people that both have, you know, weigh in on Azella speaking, as well as the ELA and mathematics assessments, our new AASA assessment. And so we'll be working with them and looking at, you know, answering those kinds of questions. I would love to, you know, if you can write those up to me and send them, that would be great, so we can put them in the forefront of their mind, as well as working with our educators to look at, you know, what we would bring them in on conversations about, like, what would this measure, what would we be looking for in addition to information that we're already getting. I mean, I know there are some parameters around what we'll be able to do in the system, but I think that we are very much open to having those conversations with educators, with our other partners at ADE, as well as bringing this to our TAC to help us think through the best way to do this so that it's not redundant.
Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Huffman, members, thank you, Audra. That somewhat helps, but I wonder if I guess, is this the correct order or sequence to do things, to push this through before having those conversations about redundancy? I don't know. I'm just posing a genuine question. I really don't know. Or, you know, is it worth it to kind of consider all those pieces first? Because it sounds like, yeah, those things are all in place. Schools and districts are already doing it. You know, is this sufficiently different, I guess is my question, to warrant, anyway.
So if I could chime in once again, so we had some of those conversations with the Move On When Reading team, and we talked about, you know, because schools are able to choose the different, and not everyone is using the same tool, this would provide some standardization in that measure. But also they talked about possibly having the schools submit data for the first two, and then using this one as their third piece of data. So that is also a possibility that we discussed that hasn't been finalized yet, but that was something that was brought up, because absolutely the concern about redundancy and things like that have been brought up early on in this conversation.
Thank you. Okay, as long as those are conversations happening, yeah, that puts me at ease. And then I wonder about the 4 to 5 questions about phonics. Are they going to be like, I just wonder what they're going to look like, but I feel comfortable as long as there's reading specialists and kindergarten teachers at the table and early childhood reading specialists. I mean, I feel comfortable as long as, because you mentioned that they would be involved in the process. So yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. Thank you, Audra. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve item 3B?
So moved.
Member Burton, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Member Kay. All in favor? Again, cameras on, off mute. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you very much, Audra. Very much appreciate it. Nice job. Now we'll move to a call to a public where I do believe there are some folks who would like to chat with us. This is the time for the public to comment on items on today's general session. And once again, just to reiterate, speakers, please limit yourself to 3 minutes. And as we chatted, Director Williams, we have some folks who would like to chat with us.
Yes, thank you, Vice President, core members of the board. Thank you, Jessica, for putting up that timer. Prior to calling the 6 individuals, I do want to put on the record that the board was provided with a written comment from William Kohler, a written comment from Margaret Schaefer, and 18 written comments from ESA constituents. And then just for the board and the public to know, we did receive about 30 additional ESA comments after the noon deadline for written comment on Friday and then over the weekend. So board staff will work on compiling those ESA written comments, and I'll send you all an email later this evening with comments that we received over the weekend after that noon deadline. All right. First up, we have Jenny Clark, followed by Tamara Kumpfmiller. Tamara, I apologize if I said that incorrectly. I do not see a Jenny Clark in the Zoom. So we'll move to Tamara, and then if Jenny joins, we'll put her back on the list. So Tamara.
Thanks, Alicia. You did get my name right. Can you hear me okay?
Good. Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yeah, the good thing about German is it's fairly phonetic, so it's pretty easy. Okay, so I just wanted to, first of all, say thank you for allowing me the time to speak. There's just a couple of things as an ESA parent that I would like to bring to the board today. The first of those is, I know it's been mentioned time and time again, but it is timeliness. I have found that especially in Q3, my 2 children are on the ClassWallet platform, and we have had to submit a lot of concierge type requests because our vendors are not in ClassWallet and we don't have a debit card option and really can't afford to front the costs to go through the reimbursement process much. And every single one of those concierge requests has taken at least 2 weeks to process from beginning to end. That is concerning because a lot of times some of these requests are things that might sell out in that 2-week time frame, and I've had that happen a couple of times. And so then we have to go back to the drawing board and start over when things come back in stock or things like that. A second concern actually came up based on the Parents Advisory Committee meeting last Friday in regard to the use of the new coming debit card process. It was mentioned kind of offhand that we are going to lose the concierge and reimbursement processes if we do get this debit card. And I see major flaw in that because there are people who will never work with ClassWallet, especially and including online school programs like Power Homeschool, which is one that we were looking at to kind of build up our children in particular and use in addition to their books and things that we've been getting. The problem being that they're not in ClassWallet. We will never get them into ClassWallet, and we cannot do the reimbursement process for that. So if that reimbursement or even concierge is taken away, we will lose access to that completely. My children are young, so I'm not worried about college just yet, but I know there are a lot of people that just found out that they can't use that card to pay for college tuition either, which again, that's a big concern to a lot of families and ours down the way. On the whole, we are very, very grateful for the ESA. Those are just a couple of things that I really wanted to address and bring to the, oh, sorry, one last thing I forgot. I didn't write myself an epistle this time. I wanted to mention, we live in a rural part of Arizona where swimming in particular is limited to 3 pools. One of them being the YMCA, which is the only one that has qualified instructors. Their instructors largely are qualified through the YMCA, however, and that process of getting their qualifications has been a little more difficult. And I'm not even sure that their qualifications count because they're not listed in the handbook, although the YMCA's qualifications are super stringent. So anyway, I just wanted to mention maybe if that could be listed as one of the qualifications, knowing that there are rural areas where that might be the only option. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Next up, we're going to have Heather McRoberts, followed by Kathy Visser. Heather?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for letting us be here and speak today. I just wanted to tell you how much the ESA program means to my family. I do want to ask that you will consider using ESA funds in conjunction with insurance. Our son, Jack, has been living with autism and has had 3 hours of speech, 2 hours of occupational therapy, and 27 hours of ABA therapy for the last 3 weeks. It's pretty much a full-time job to be a 6-year-old little boy. Without insurance, it costs thousands of dollars a week to receive this type of intensive therapy and is unaffordable for most families living with autism. ESA funds at this rate could not possibly cover the cost of ABA therapy for more than a few months at this rate. With exceptional insurance, my own family's co-pays are upwards of $800 a month. It's almost a mortgage payment. The majority of people cannot afford that dollar amount, but more importantly, the majority of kids with autism cannot afford to go without this type of therapy. It has been life-changing for my son and my family. I know many kids with disabilities can live an independent life if they get the help they need early on. And ABA is just one of the many therapies for individuals on the spectrum. By being in favor of using ESA funds in conjunction with copays, it will not only mean improving the quality of life for many of these individuals, but it also means the state of Arizona will see many individuals drop state services due to the intense early intervention they received versus relying on the state for support throughout adulthood. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Heather. Heather, you broke up just a little bit during your public comment. So if you have that written and if you could email it to me or to the inbox, I'll send it out to the board members after the meeting.
Okay. Could you send me an email in the chat section?
Yes, I'll have Jessica Mueller, one of the board staffers, send you the email address.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, next up we have Kathy Visser, followed by Rebecca Cross. Kathy? Kathy, I see your photo. You just need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there I am.
There you go.
Thank you. My name is Kathy Visser, and I've been an ESA parent since the very beginning of the program. I had a few comments on the handbook, one of which is that through all the handbooks, I think this one is the most clear and concise, and it just gets better every year. So I appreciate the work that's gone into the handbook. We didn't used to have a handbook, and it was very difficult to navigate the program without that, and this is very helpful. I have a list of things. First, the format on a few things, I think it would be helpful if, where it's possible to put a list of items and have the whole list on the same page. There's a couple of places where the list drops off on the next page, and it looks like you're finished reading the list, but then you go to the next page and there's still more of the list. And another place in there, I believe the first item or two on the list is on one page and the entire list is on the next page. So if they could just put a little more white space in there and put the entire list on the same page, it makes it much more easy to utilize the list that way. And I know in our groups, a lot of times the lists are reposted in the groups for people to make it easy to access. And if we're not having to repost 2 pages versus 1, it makes it easier. Another comment I have is not so much about the handbook, but the application deadlines. There's a real feeling that cutting off the applications for a full 5 months in the spring is not really compliant with what the purpose of the year-round applications was supposed to mean. There are a lot of families that after February 1st just desperately needed to apply for this program this year, and they were not allowed to apply for this year. And some qualified for this year, but because of the pandemic and the situation, they don't qualify for next year. So it's become a huge problem for families that actually should qualify for the program to apply. My next comment was about the insurance copays. I'd like to add to what Heather said about the insurance copays. I don't believe there's anything in statute that says that we can't use insurance copays. And for the first couple of years of the program, we were actually allowed to do insurance copays, and it made these therapies much more accessible to families. So I'd like the board to reconsider, and the department to reconsider those insurance copays. It's the same therapies one way or another, no matter how it's paid for. Then I see a problem with tuition for private schools that are not willing to sign up for Class Wallet, not being able to be reimbursed or paid with the debit card once we have that debit card option in Class Wallet. And I see that as pretty problematic. There was another place in the handbook on the supply fee. It says supply fee is allowed, and then it continues with a list of what's not allowed on a supply fee, which basically lists everything I could imagine a supply covering. So it would be helpful to look at things in the handbook instead of just a list of what we cannot do, say, but this is allowable under this fee, and put the what it is allowable as those fees versus just a list of not allowable items. Because I have no idea what a supply fee could be if it wasn't for those items.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for the ability to comment on this. It's
absolutely. We appreciate you doing so. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kathy. Next up, we have Rebecca Cross, followed by Kayla Sveden. I don't see a Rebecca Cross. So Kayla, I see that you're on. So let's move to you, Kayla.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. President Narducci, members of the board, thank you for allowing us to make a comment today. My name is Kayla Spadine. I am an ESA mom, and I am also a member of the Parent Advisory Council. I wanted to give a comment today about the new appeals process that was put in place for ESA parents that get a rejected a rejection from a request made to purchase an item or a service. And this new process goes through the state board for appeals. And with this new process, we've seen a significant increase in the amount of denials that ESA parents are receiving, many times for small things that should easily be approved. And basically, when a parent says, well, you know, this is curriculum, or this is supplemental, or I have a letter from our speech therapist because this is, you know, this is an assistive technology request, ADE staff is basically going straight to, well, here's you know, the information for you to appeal. You can go through the appeals process. And this is very intimidating to a lot of parents, especially for things that should be easily approved, to send them through the appeals process, because naturally parents, especially those of us with special needs children, don't have a lot of time to go through these big, long processes. And, you know, every time an appeals request goes through, CAT at the state board has to secure a spot, court date, and it goes on the calendar, and she has to go through and do all of these things. Sending every single question that an ESA parent, like anytime we say, you know, hey, this should be approved for XYZ reasons, it should not be pushed straight to the full appeals process. This was supposed to make things easier for parents, but the ADE staff seem to be using this appeals process as a bully club and an intimidation tactic for parents. Currently, as far as I am aware, absolutely no appeal has gone all the way to a judge. As soon as a parent actually decides to put in the process for appeal, within a week or so, ADE staff goes, oh, you know what? We looked at that again. It's approved. This wastes everyone's time in resources. It wastes the time and resources at the ADE. It wastes time and resources at the SBE. And it certainly wastes time and resources for ESA parents that don't have it because we are busy managing our kids' education. There needs to be a very clear process put in place that the ADE goes through before they tell a parent, well, just go appeal. We should not be pushing the nuclear option anytime there's a disagreement with whether something should be approved or not, especially with things like assistive technology requests. Currently, ADE staff is turning around and asking parents for full IEPs or med evaluations when they are not even qualified to read these things, in lieu of getting a professional letter from a professional like speech therapist requesting AT technology for speech therapies like apps on an iPad or such, OT professionals requesting Theraputty, things like that. They're qualified to determine whether or not the student that they are working with needs these things. It's just the ADE's job to say that, yes, you gave us the required information, we're going to approve that. It's not the ADE's job to evaluate whether that approval is necessary. So I just think that there needs to be some clarification on what the ADE staff is, what their job actually is, and not to run the parents around the mill, waste time, money, resources on everyone's end. Thank you.
Thank you. Alicia, I know there were a couple that that weren't present through the first go around. Have they appeared, or are we?
Yes, I do not see them, Dr. Kaur. Those two individuals were Jenny Clark and Rebecca Cross. So we can just conclude the request to speak for item 4. And if those individuals join later, I will ask you, Dr. Kaur, if you wish to take them in a different public comment so that their voices can be heard. But setting that aside, Dr. Kaur, it's up to you. On our agenda under the superintendent's report, we did have a student update. The student has joined us.
Oh, absolutely. That's a no-brainer. We
Okay.
we absolutely want to hear from the student. So
Okay.
Superintendent Hoffman, do you want to introduce our student speaker this morning?
Thank you so much. So our student is Zarin, and Sierra, can you share with us how Zarin is connected?
Yes, it said that he is connecting right now.
On the Zoom?
Yes, he said that he's rejoining as we speak.
Okay.
So I don't know if you want to give him a second or.
Oh, there he is.
I think I see him.
Hi, Zarin. Are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. We are ready for your student report.
I'm so sorry for being so late. I was trying to log on and then Zoom was giving me difficulties, but here now, and here to give a little thing about student competency.
Thank you. And
Please.
Zarin, could you first introduce yourself?
I'm Zarin Hattery. I am coming in from Mesa, Arizona. I am a junior in high school. I attend Red Mountain High School, and my pronouns are he, him, and his.
Thank you so much. Go right ahead with your report.
So I wanted to just quickly give a little personal backstory. So when I was in first grade, I was in first grade, right? And I was pretty good at English and social studies, but I really struggled with math. And I had never seen myself in class as one of the students who was able to do math assignments because I was just one of the students who was good at English. I didn't realize that I could become a student who was diverse and was able to do all subjects of subjects at a sufficient level for what I was expected to be. And so I went on in my schooling and eventually had to take summer school for first grade because I was one of those students who wasn't good enough at math yet. Now, that eventually was fixed. And when I got to high school in my sophomore year, I was able to join a program where I could do college classes in the morning at MCC. So I took the opportunity, and I was able to do it, and I got straight A's. And the only reason I think that I was able to do so well in a college course, even though I was a sophomore in high school, was because of a class that the college had us take, and that was a study skills class. That class taught me about competencies. Now, I'm sure you've heard of the unconscious competence, conscious competence. And what I've seen a lot of students have, and what I had when I was in first grade, was an issue with unconscious competence or unconscious incompetence. I didn't know that I didn't know how to do things. I just accepted it and tried to move on, but I couldn't, and it did damage me, and I ended up having to do summer school. So what I'm hoping to call the board to do is develop some sort of activity or test that can allow students to see their true potential, that they are actually capable of more than they give themselves credit for. Because it would have helped me a lot if I had that earlier on, and only until I was in high school and let alone in a college class was I able to learn that important lesson. So I don't exactly have a real plan. I just know that that's something that's really helped me with my career as a student. And since that class, I've had straight A's in everything because I have learned how to allow myself to do work and see my potential in the work that I do.
Thank you so much, Zarin. And also thank you for the shout out to Arizona's amazing community colleges. So nicely done. And we appreciate you sharing your perspective and your story with us, and certainly wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Excellent. Then I will move us on to the general session, item 5 on our agenda. That is a presentation and discussion of the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program Handbook that's been referenced by a couple of folks during the call to the public. No action will be taken today. This is for information only. Some action will be taken at our April board meeting. But with that, Director Williams.
Thank you, Vice President, core members of the board. We have Deputy Chief of Staff Whitney Marsh with us today to present on item 5A. Jessica will run the PowerPoint presentation for Ms. Marsh.
Welcome, Whitney. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can.
Great. Good morning, Vice President Core, Superintendent Hoffman, and members of the board. As Leisha mentioned, I'm Whitney Marsh, Deputy Chief of Staff at the Arizona Department of Education. Thank you for having me this morning to present on the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program Parent Handbook for school year 2021-2022. Thank you. I recently presented to you regarding this program, so hopefully it comes as no surprise that I want to start out the presentation with a little bit of background context to get us all on the same page before diving into the material. Since we will be going over the handbook, it's important that everyone understands the role of the handbook in this program and how it relates to the other authorizing policy documents. The ESA program is established in statute, which is enacted by the legislature. Statute establishes a broad framework for an area of law. In this case, it establishes the Empowerment Scholarship Account Program to provide public funds to qualifying students to support customized education options outside of the public school system. The law empowers this board to make rules, sometimes referred to as regulations, and authorizes the Department of Education to establish policies to execute its responsibility to administer the ESA program. Following the law and the board's established rulemaking process, the State Board of Education adopted the rules package related to the ESA program in October. Rules establish the operating principles for the ESA program and have the force of law. The rules must be consistent with the law. As we move along this chart from left to right, additional details are filled in at every step, providing more information on how the program is administered. Policies and procedures are established by the agency responsible for executing the program. In this case, that's the Department of Education. Agency policies and procedures document the department's approach and practices in administering the program. Agency policies in some circumstances may also include interpretation of rules and statutes where necessary. Again, policies and procedures must be consistent with the rules and with the law. And because I believe, as Kathy Visser mentioned in her public comment before this, participation in this program offers autonomous use of public funds within restricted categories of spending. So the department has for several years now utilized a parent handbook as a resource for account holders because of the high stakes nature of the program. The handbook does not establish policy, rather it provides additional guidance and instructions on how to use the ESA program and contains information on the department's policies and procedures. The handbook becomes part of the annual contract signed by account holders. The handbook must be in line with the department's policies and procedures, with the rules, and with the statute. It's also important to note here that the rules adopted by the board require the department to develop a handbook in consultation with ESA parents and submit it to the board every year. Next slide, please. So at the department, we're also making it a habit to establish and communicate our goals and objectives for the projects we're engaged in. So that's what this is. For this exercise, our goal is to revise the parent handbook for the next school year, to incorporate recommendations made by parents and stakeholders, and to reflect the changes made in the last 12 months to administration of the program as a result of our new processes, rules, and statutes. Our objective is to publish the revised handbook pursuant to the rules by May 1st, 2021. Thank you. I did notice that in the written comments submitted to the board regarding the handbook, they were based on a version, not the same version that was submitted to you. So I wanted to lay out here the version history for your reference. The current year's handbook is located on the handbook page of the ESA website. ADE tracked changes against the current version and posted a redlined version on our website. It's dated January 4th. It was actually posted January 18th, along with a web form to submit feedback. Based on the feedback and recommendations received, ADE made substantial changes to the redline version. This revised version was submitted to the board with a separate summary of changes that is included in the materials. The changes were so significant that the redline copy was completely illegible and therefore wasn't submitted. So instead, we provided you with a clean copy of the revised version and then a separate description of changes. Our plan is to finalize revisions to the handbook and submit a final copy by next Monday, March 29th, for board approval at the April meeting. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to walk through this slide line by line, but you will see we have had a very condensed timeline to make changes in advance of the required submission dates to the board. Because the handbook is part of the contract and contracts are issued beginning at the beginning of the calendar year, we may consider working with the board to move this timeline up for next year so that the new version is ready when parents are signing their contracts. The key milestones to date include that the red line version of the handbook was posted to the website for 2.5 weeks with an open form to submit written comments. All active account holders were notified of the form and ability to submit written comments and the window to do so through the emailed ESA newsletter. The Parent Advisory Council met to discuss the handbook. The Parent Advisory Council meetings are not open to the public, but they are open to ESA families who register in advance and have been well attended so far with 11 council members and anywhere from 50 plus attendees. The council provided an opportunity for members to give feedback on the handbook, but also allowed non-council parents the opportunity to submit written comments and provided time for 10 non-council members to speak during the meeting and provide feedback as well. Then the department worked closely with our Assistant Attorney General to review all related feedback and make additional changes. And the results of those changes were submitted to you on March 1st. Next slide, please. Once we had all the comments collected from the various forums, they were broken down into separate components based on subject. So I have to give a huge shout out here to the legal extern working with our Assistant Attorney General this semester. Her name is Vanessa. She has incredible attention to detail, and she organized and categorized all of our information from the various forums so that it could be easily tracked by the program, and we could ensure that every comment was captured and acted on. So this result, she took all of the comments and separated them out into individual components, which resulted in 302 component parts that then were categorized by type of comment and related section of the handbook. Next slide, please. The comments were categorized into these 10 types. This pie chart displays a breakdown of comments by type. You will see that nearly half of the comments received would not be considered substantive, but were related to grammar, formatting, style, and conforming changes. We also had a fair number of comments requesting clarifications and also requesting changes to policy, rule, or statute. Next slide, please. So then, of course, the next question is, how did we act on all of those comments? This bar chart shows for each type of comment how many were addressed in the handbook, either resolved with new language or reorganization, or not addressed, that's the red. And this is either because they were advocating for non-substantive changes that have been postponed to a later date when we have more time, or because they requested a change to policy, rule, or statute that wasn't appropriate for this process. A reminder from the first slide, the handbook does not establish policy or rule, but provides further clarification or information about how the program is currently being implemented. So that particular type of request was more likely than others not to be addressed in the handbook. See the policy and statute subject area there in the middle. All things considered, 86% of the comments were addressed in some way in the revised version before you. Next slide, please. A summary of substantive changes have been provided as part of the materials for the board and are also available to the public on the board's website. Based on feedback, the program made several additions to the handbook to include definitions, examples, and more guidance. I'm not going to walk through these. They're available online. Next slide, please. This is a continuation of that list. You will notice in this summary, many areas raised by parents have been addressed. Next slide, please. While these changes aren't considered substantive, they do cover a lot of the feedback and therefore the bulk of the edits made, and why this version does look very different. They would be considered copy editing, changes for tone and clarity. So we did accept that and did attempt to make changes to the overall tone, which is feedback that we heard several times about, instead of being focused on what not to do, frame the handbook in terms in more positive terms. So what to do, how to use the program. So we did that. The next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, the requests not incorporated were generally comments that were not related to the handbook. We're advocating for change in department policy or statute or rule. Examples of these comments were included in the executive summary, and which is, like I said before, available with the board materials. Next slide, please. So one of the reasons we are still making changes to the handbook is that we have been working, as was mentioned during the public comment, we have been working with the Treasurer's Office and Class Wallet to activate the debit card feature in Class Wallet by July 1. And this has many both practical, functional, and policy decisions that have to be made that relate to the contract, but also in how we operate as a program. So it has involved the Treasurer's Office, like I mentioned, and we're still working out some of the details, but we want to make sure that we include all the relevant processes and new instructions and guidelines in the handbook before we submit the final version, but still working on it. The next steps for the process is to finalize the handbook, making those changes to the debit card feature, and then cleaning up the formatting, doing one last check for alignment to our brand guidelines and consistency and editing, and then submitting to you by next Monday, March 29th, so that it can be reviewed and approved at the April 26th meeting and timely posted by May 1st. Next slide, please. Okay, well, that's all I have for you today. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Kaur, if I may, I have a question.
Yeah, please, Member Broussard.
Yes.
And thank you, Whitney, for that. Member Broussard, please.
Yeah. So Whitney, thank you. You guys have done a great job. I have a question. The next version that you give us, will it be redlined so we can see the additional changes without having to flip back and forth and read through the entire document again?
Vice President Kaur, Member Broussard. So would you like it redlined from the version you currently have or from our original version you currently have?
I think from this one would make it easy. And then, you know, this may be answered. I just have some confusion. Our first ESA parent who spoke today spoke about possibly losing the concierge service, but then we have it in the handbook. So I'm just confused as to what the status is of that.
Thank you, Vice President Kaur and Member Broussard. Yes, so that's part of the details that we've been trying to work out with the Treasurer's Office and Class Wallet. If the debit card feature is made available, which we know there is a turnkey debit card with Class Wallet, but there are additional considerations regarding the contract because all purchases made through Class Wallet now through the marketplace and through the direct pay vendor, reimbursement and concierge have a fee. The debit card does not, nor is it intended to replace purchases made for vendors in the marketplace. And so if we, you know, when listening to feedback on why a debit card is necessary, considering it would, because reimbursement does not serve many families who do not have the funds to front the money. Concierge service is not the most efficient way to make a purchase. So we're working out if the debit card is made available, do those other features continue to be offered? Is that something that is part of contract negotiations, or is that just a decision that department makes? We're still working through that. So there's no final decision on that, but it has been considered that if a debit card was made available, that those two options would no longer be necessary. But of course, we're getting feedback from parents about how they could be or would be utilized even with a debit card. So we're hearing those concerns and we're taking that feedback and we'll consider it while we work with the Treasurer's Office.
Thank you.
Anyone else question or comments? Member Kay, go ahead.
Yes, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, members. Whitney, thank you very much for the time and effort that has gone into this, and also for the background and the tutorial. based on that, I think my questions really are a little more on the policy side, based on the parent feedback. And so one of the questions that came up, or the comments that came up, had to do with advocates. And I was wondering if there is a plan to establish a process to allow advocates to be part of the process. I know working with schools and special ed populations, we have worked with advocates quite extensively. There was a comment about language barriers, some of those kinds of things. So I was wondering if a process will be established for parents to be represented by an advocate in the future.
Thank you, Vice President Kaur and Member Kay. Yeah, that's great feedback. And since it was brought up by a parent recently on the use and the need for advocates, and I know the program has worked to establish a process for that, but it has maybe been sort of ad hoc. It would make sense to document that in the handbook as a process that could be shared. And so I will take note of that and bring that back to the team.
And then my other question, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, has to do, there seems to be confusion about the health insurance component and whether that's allowable or not. We just heard in the public comment just now, and I'm wondering how we can clarify that. I did go back through the handbook, and there's definitely a portion on page 25 that references medical insurance and states that under Arizona law governing the ESA program that they're disallowed. But I don't know what the process would be for clarifying that for families. It does seem to me to make sense if it can help stretch the dollars to get those services that students need, that it would be allowable. But it sounds like, is that a statutory fix?
Vice President Kaur, Member Kay. So it's my understanding, and this is not very, I'm not very knowledgeable in this area, but that there has been discussions about this in the past, and that there is, there is a distinction between services required medically and services required to access education, and often there is overlap. But in determining, what ESA dollars are eligible for access to education, at some point it was decided, whether through from guidance with our Assistant Attorney General in the past or from the program, but it was decided that it was not allowable. And so we can seek further guidance from our Assistant Attorney General on this and provide a more clear explanation of why it is that this hasn't been allowed.
Okay, thank you. It just seems like it's a point of contention for several families. It's been raised before. And I have two more, if you'll indulge me. The other has to do with disallowing ESA parents to provide services. And I'm just wondering if you have another ESA parent who has the credentials in a legitimate business, why they would be unable to be hired by another ESA parent. I certainly understand the concern around misuse of funds, but it seems like, at least in my experience, particularly with exceptional student services, sometimes you work off of a network. So you get a group of parents who find providers that they feel comfortable with, they have the credentials, and they're able to service their students. And so the referral process starts. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that can be explored so that it's not limiting the parents' options to provide legitimate services for their students.
Thank you, Vice President Kaur and Member Kay. It's my understanding that there was clarification requested in this area And it sounds like there may be a need for further clarification, but it's my understanding that parents are allowed to be providers to other students. They're not allowed to be providers to their own student.
Okay.
But I can make sure we clarify that.
Okay, yeah, I didn't understand that. So that's helpful. And then the last question I have, I don't know if this is, I didn't check to see if it's typical practice of the department, but I was wondering if when the handbook is completed, if it will be translated and made available in Spanish or any other languages.
Vice President Cora, Member Kay, that's a great question. It has not been translated in the past, but the department has recently invested in an agency-wide process for getting translation services. So we will also look into that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Member Kay. Anyone else with? Anyone else with any questions or comments for Whitney? Well, Whitney, once again, thank you very much. Appreciate your efforts. And again, we'll look for the latest red line version from the current version in about a week. And again, to members of the board, this will be coming back as an action item, if you will, at our April meeting to hit the May 1st deadline. Whitney, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to 5B. This is an update on rulemaking procedures regarding special ed endorsements. Once again, for information only. And Deputy Director Baden, you're going to walk us through this?
Vice President Core and Superintendent Hoffman and members, very briefly, this is a rule that you last saw several months ago in October, as outlined in the executive summary. And you'll remember President Narducci, we received some public comments at that board meeting. President Narducci asked us to circle back with those folks who provided the public comments, mostly from the University of Arizona, to have a meeting with them. And we have subsequently done that. And we have another meeting with them scheduled in the next couple of weeks. And we will hopefully bring you a final, so there's updates included in this board meeting item, and hopefully bring you a final product for adoption at the April board meeting. But that's a quick update on where we're at in this rulemaking process, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions for Deputy Director Baden? Catcher, appreciate that. And we'll roll right on to the next agenda item, which is you are once again the star attraction of. This will be the presentation and discussion regarding legislative affairs. Although we don't typically take action, the board may take action to support, oppose, or remain neutral on any specific legislative proposals. So with that set up, Catcher, take it away.
Thank you, Vice President Core and Superintendent Hoffman and members. Really just a couple things, and then just open it up if there are any questions. One is that President Robbins was confirmed by the Senate earlier this month. Unfortunately, he's not here, so we can all give him congratulations, but he was confirmed, and it was pretty painless. So as all of you know, going through that process, with the exception of Superintendent Hoffman, of course, can be fun in more ways than one. So he got confirmed earlier this month, so that's good news. And then the only other thing I want to mention is just an update on where we're at in session, which is this is the last week for the regular education committees, as well as all the other regular committees. And next week will be the last week for the regular appropriations committees, and then it's a lot of floor action and maybe budget stuff. So that may sound like session's winding down, but I don't. That's maybe an optimistic view, but just giving an idea of where we're at in session. And I'm happy to, of course, you have the update that we provide weekly, and I'm happy to answer any questions that's on there. Obviously, a lot of things were updated on Friday and sort of to be determined because it is the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of strike everything amendments that get introduced. So trying to be nimble these last 2 weeks, but certainly available for any questions.
Any questions for Catcher?
Vice President Corr.
Yeah, please, Member K, go ahead.
Okay, Vice President Corr, Superintendent Hoffman, members. Catcher, thank you so much for your work on all of this, particularly your work on Friday with the strike everything amendments. I don't have so much a question, but I do have a concern to raise over one of the bills. House Bill 2322, I think that's the DRP language. So I just want to draw some attention to this particular bill. The Dropout Recovery Program has been in existence for the last couple of years. And in my opinion, it has some challenges as it currently exists. It's been a growing program, and there's very little reporting available as to the quality and efficacy of the program. And this bill looks to me like it expands the program, and it takes away also potentially some of the important components like individual learning plans for each student. And instead of having these touch points with adults on campus, it changes funding to credit earning. And this has really made me concerned. And I'm thinking about a lot of the conversations we've had as a board, particularly around the accountability system, and Member Baker in particular, often asking, what are we incentivizing here? And this seems to incentivize credit earning. And while that's an important component, and it's something obviously with the Dropout Recovery Program that you want to look at, I don't think it's the only thing that should be incentivized. And certainly there's a fine balance. The other concern I had with this is how students fit into the accountability system. This would allow a school to function like an AOI without any kind of attendance taking. So there's no minutes attendance, there minutes recorded for attending. There are also no absences. So I'm not sure what that does in terms of the accountability system and how students would fit into the full academic year classification or any of the other components. Also, if you take it to an extreme, it seems like I could have a 15-year-old in this program who was not in school for 30 days, or who I, as the school, made a decision that they would fit better into this Dropout Recovery Program, again, without any attendance taking, any absence recording. And I just think that there are some gaps here that need to be looked at. The reason why I'm a little more knowledgeable about the Dropout Recovery Programs is because the organization I work with a couple of years ago applied for a dropout recovery program through the charter board. We received it, but it sat on the shelf. And it was ultimately because we recognized that this would fit a very small subset of the population and that we could serve them through our alternative programs just as well and perhaps better. So we ended up not using it. My understanding of this bill was that it didn't get a hearing initially, and that it was supposed to go through an interim study session, which would have raised a lot of these questions, and I think would have brought stakeholders to the table, including the State Board of Ed. So the fact that it didn't get the hearing, it isn't going through the interim study session, and it's now getting a hearing this week, I just wanted to raise these concerns. I personally, obviously, am concerned and feel that the board should weigh in somehow. If it means meeting with the legislative subcommittee, I'm happy to make myself available for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Kay. Any other comments, concerns, or questions from any member? Catcher, you need a last word?
Vice President Corr, no.
Okay.
Well, I guess that is my last word, but no, I don't need a last word.
The last word is that there is no need for a last word. As always, I'd like to echo everyone's thanks for the great work that you do, Catcher, advocating for us. So thank you. I will move on to item 6. Once again, this is a call to the public. This is a time for the public to comment on items on the consent agenda of educator enforcement actions. Director Williams, do we have anyone who wishes to speak during this section?
Vice President Corr, we do not have anyone requested to speak for this item in regard to the consent enforcement, but we were able to get a hold of Jenny Clark, who, if you recall, had signed up to speak for item number 4. Would it be appropriate? Do you agree with her speaking now for 3 minutes?
Without question, yes. We want to hear from as many folks who want to talk to us. So, Jenny, please go ahead and let us know what you'd like to talk about.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice President Corr and board members, and thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Jenny Clark, and I am a parent of 5 children, 4 of whom are on the Arizona ESA program. I apologize for my delay earlier. We run a cottage school in our home on Mondays, so we had 16 kids that were transitioning into their classes earlier. The present issue that I would like to address that came up during section 4 on the parent handbook is the internal policy, which is the internal policy that guides the ESA program, has to do, again, with the prohibitions on health insurance, which I believe can be changed and allowed. I do believe that the current policy is in error and therefore should be changed. My husband and I both presented on this last year to the state board, and he's an attorney here in Arizona. And I just want to clarify that there is presently nothing in the ESA statute that disallows the use of ESA funds in conjunction with personal health insurance for educational therapies. Therefore, I believe that ADE should allow therapies to be paid with health insurance and ESA funds. And this is actually already done by the public schools that bill a student's Medicaid for the therapies they provide in the school setting. The Division of Developmental Disabilities and the Arizona Long-Term Care System also pays therapies in conjunction with a parent's insurance and is considered a payer of last resort. As long as the therapy expense is allowed by the statute, there is no reason why parents shouldn't be able to use ESA funds in conjunction with insurance for approved therapies. This, as others have mentioned, allows the cost of the appointment to be reduced and therefore saves student scholarship dollars so they can be used for additional therapies. And my family is presently in this situation. We have to stop and start certain therapies because our ESA dollars only stretch so far each quarter. So sometimes, for example, right now we're doing an expensive handwriting therapy and we've had to stop other therapies that are covered by insurance and the cost could be reduced. So in essence, ESA students are being penalized because their parents have health insurance. If the legislature wanted to exclude this practice, I believe they would have included it in the statute. And this concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Appreciate it. Director Williams, but no one for the educator enforcement actions, correct? So we can move on to item 7.
Vice President Corr, that is correct. We can move on to item 7. We do have requests to speak for item 8.
Fair enough. Okay, then with that, I will move on to the consent agenda for
Dr. Corr, Member Ruiz has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Armando. Member Ruiz, please go ahead.
Thank you, Vice President, Superintendent Hoffman, and members. I just wanted to respond to the comment that the last speaker.
Probably shouldn't do that.
Okay, I'll wait for an opening where I can.
Yeah, just as a general rule, we're cautioned not to respond to calls to the public. So we want to hear from you, Member Ruiz, just not now, and we'll find a more appropriate way. Yeah.
Okay, I'll find a place in here to squeeze in.
Okay, fair enough. Item 7, consent agenda. Certification enforcement actions. These are consent enforcement actions. And if no one objects, I would like to take this item as a single motion. Do I have a motion to approve items 7A1 through 7A10, as well as 7B1?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Member Burton. Thank you very much. All in favor of approving, again, items 7A1 through 7A10 and 7B1, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So we will move on to item 8. Once again, a call to the public. And as Director Williams has indicated, we have some folks who would like to chat with us. Speakers will once again, please be limited to 3 minutes. And Director Williams, you want to introduce the folks coming to speak to us?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kaur. For the record, we did have a, it was titled Respondent's Brief, an objection of the PPAC recommendation of revocation of license for Aaron Sharkey. That's item number 9F. Board staff took that as a public comment and we included it in item 9F. So that is part of your packet, just for the record. And then you have 4 individuals wishing to speak. First up, we have Jess Lorona, followed by Nancy Hardman. Jess Lorona?
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead, sir.
Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, and board members. I will first speak to item A1, which is Angela Isaac. This was a negotiated settlement agreement, which took some time with active participation with counsel from the Attorney General's office. My sole purpose of requesting the opportunity to speak was whether or not there were any questions with respect to that negotiated settlement agreement. I'm here to answer those. If not, I can move on to my next item.
Ms. Lorona, the board members cannot ask questions when request to speak, so go ahead and move on to the next item.
Thank you. The next item that I would like to speak to is the Aaron Sharkey matter. This was the case where PPAC found one aggravating factor and 5 mitigating factors. The most important mitigating factor that was determined was the fact that my client does in fact suffer from a mental illness, and this was medically based. If you reviewed the transcript in this matter, the board had a difficult time discerning what the appropriate punishment would be for a teacher that suffers from a mental illness. I do believe that when you look at some of the comments that were made by the committee members, and more specifically, even the last comment by member Simic, where she says the respondent also has the opportunity to appeal this situation. Once she gets herself under control, she could always appeal the option as well. I just think that the committee did not, whether they took her mental illness seriously or not, they clearly punished her for her mental illness. And the medical testimony that was presented is that she was in remission, she was taking medication, she was doing very, very well. And that was the medical testimony that was presented. I believe that the committee erred in revocation. Obviously, a revocation keeps her out of teaching for 5 years. There's really not much she can do. Sure, she can appeal to the Superior Court, but she won't be able to do anything for 5 years. And based upon the record and testimony that's presented, medically, she's doing great. Medically, she's doing fine. She's taking her medication and she's doing amazing. And once again, you have one aggravating and 5 mitigating factors, and then the resolution was revocation. I just feel that was inappropriate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Kaur, next up we have Nancy Hardman.
Nancy, are you with us?
Mr. Lorona, if you could please mute yourself.
Yes, I am here.
Thank you. Thank you, Nancy. We can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm Nancy Hardeman. Good morning, Arizona Educational and Health Boards. Regarding to my case, I respectfully request your consideration regarding to the time frame of my case, because I've been waiting for this decision from September 9, 2019 until now. So I will appreciate if the board adjusts the time for my case decisions.
Ms. Hardman, does that conclude your comments?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jonathan Livingston, followed by Molly B. Molly and Jonathan, I do understand that your agenda item is 9G in our agenda. When the board has agenda items like yours, the respondent and the respondent's counsel can address the board in the agenda item. Did you still want to provide public comment, or do you want to do that in the agenda item?
I would like to go ahead and just provide comment now, if that's okay.
Certainly. That's Jonathan speaking, right?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
sir, that is correct.
Mr. Livingston, go ahead. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Members of the board, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Levinson, and last month PPAC voted to deny my teaching application and bar me from reapplying for a period of about 5 years. I've come here today to ask you to reduce the time to when I can reapply to make it a more reasonable time of 1 year or possibly even 3 years. The reason for the denial of my application was that 10 years ago, I participated in a series of unfortunate crimes that resulted in a conviction of myself. It's one of the darkest days of my life that this happened to me. I took full responsibility for my actions, and I served my time. I completed my probation, and really it kind of derailed my life for about 7 or 8 years as a result of my misbehavior. And I went back to school and I finished my degree, and I always had my eye towards teaching, and I've done everything that I can do at this point. My conviction was set aside by the Superior Court last year. I have my fingerprint clearance card that I got through a good cause exception in 2017. I had my PPAC hearing in which I had 2 veteran teachers who've been mentors and friends of mine for over a decade who came to speak on my behalf. One of whom is still currently teaching. The other has moved on to a different profession. And I've really had to face a lot of challenges over the past couple years. And I feel that having those opportunities come to me as far as being able to move forward with my life and hopefully move forward with teaching have come because of education. And the real reason that I've wanted to continue this path is because I want to help people. I want to give people that opportunity that maybe, I didn't have at some point, and say, hey, this is what's possible when you get your education, and this is what you can do, and this is why it's important. And I feel without having my education, I would not be where I'm at today. And I'm just asking for just a little bit of a chance here. That's all I can ask for. And I appreciate the time that you've afforded me to come here and speak today. And thank you again.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Molly, did you wish to comment now, or do you want to wait until the agenda item is called?
What's the board's preference? I'm happy to oblige either way, wherever it would be most helpful.
So I can tell you the process, Molly. The process is for items such as yours, The respondents' counsel is able to talk about the document that they submitted to the board. And then the state's counsel then has almost like a rebuttal, lawyer speak, time to talk to the board, and then the board makes their decision. But it does allow within the agenda item for the board to ask you questions as Mr. Livingston's counsel.
Perfect. So let's stick with that. That sounds good.
So wait for the agenda item.
Yeah, that seems
Okay.
more appropriate. Thanks.
Great. So we'll just keep you on Zoom. Just go ahead and mute yourself. And then when we get to 9G, Vice President Kaur will explain the instructions.
Thank you, Molly. So then, Director Williams, that concludes those wishing to speak to us under
That is-
item call to the public.
That is correct, Dr. Kaur.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 9, general session, certification enforcement actions. Items 9A1, 9A2, and 9A3 are all negotiated settlement agreements. If there is no objection from a member of the board, I would like to take these items in a single motion. And hearing no objection, do I have a motion to approve items 9A1, 9A2, and 9A3?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
I think that was Dr. Mack. I'm going to make a vice presidential call and make that Dr. Mack as the second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 I'm forgetting to remind you to put your camera on, but I think you all do, and thank you. Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you very much. We'll move on to 9B. Here is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Ellen Cassidy for a period of 5 years. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendations of the PPAC to revoke any and all teaching certificates held by Ellen Cassidy for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Broussard. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Kay, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. All right, I appreciate it. I will move on to 9C. And once again, presentation, discussion, and possible action on findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to suspend the certificate of Nancy Hardiman for a period of 2 years. If there is no need for a discussion, is there any desire to discuss this item?
I do have a question.
Please, Member Broussard.
So we heard Ms. Hardiman speak, and once this takes effect, does it take effect once we make this vote from today's vote, or from when this case was first happening in September of 2019?
Sure. Vice President Kaur, Member Broussard, all of the board's actions start on the day that the action is taken. We do not do retroactive discipline.
Any other questions or discussion? With that, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC to suspend any and all teaching certificates held by Nancy Hardiman for a period of 2 years with the condition of successful completion of mandatory reporting training, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
Member Wellborn, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Ruiz, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Excellent. Moving on to 9D, presentation, discussion, and possible action on findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Sean Hinton for a period of 5 years. Is there a desire to discuss or any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the PPAC and revoke the teaching certificates of Sean Hinton for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
Member
I'll
Wellborn,
second.
thank you very much. And was that Member Burton?
Yep.
Thank you so much with the second. All in,
Correction, that was Member Broussard with the second.
all right. thank you,
I thought he
Member
was asking who
Broussard.
made the first motion. Yep, I'm the second.
Thank you, Member Broussard, and my apologies, Member Burton. With that, do I, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. We will move on to 9E. This is the presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendations of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Rebecca Riley for a period of 5 years. Is there any need or desire to discuss or any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendations of the PPAC and revoke the teaching certificates of Rebecca Riley for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
What would I do without you, Member Wellborn? Thank you so much. I have Member Wellborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much, Member Kay. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you very much. We are moving on to 9F. Presentation, discussion, and possible action on the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and the recommendation of the Professional Practices Advisory Committee to revoke the certificates of Aaron Sharkey for a period of 5 years. Is there a desire to discuss or any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt the findings of fact, conclusion of law, and the recommendation of PPAC to revoke the teaching certificate of Aaron Sharkey for a period of 5 years, and that all states and territories be so notified?
So moved.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
I think it was Member Burton, just ahead of Member Reeds for the second. Thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you very much. Motion passes. So Director Williams, I believe we are at the point, and this always throws me for a loop a little bit, so you walk me through it.
Yes.
So we do have Molly, counsel of Jonathan Levinson, who wishes to address the board at this point. Is now the appropriate time?
Yes, Vice President Kaur, let me just do an introduction to the agenda item, and then we can allow for Molly to speak on her client's behalf. So item 9G is a presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the request for review of Jonathan Levinson, case number C-2019-000688R. The board has two options in these types of agenda items. One, the board may grant review of the decision and affirm or modify the previous decision. Option two, the board may deny the request for review and affirm the previous decision. We ask that the respondent and the respondent's counsel, as well as state counsel, in this case it's Ms. Anderson, keep comments brief. The board has been provided with both the motion for review of decision and the state's response for the motion to rehear. Also, I forgot this point, just for board members and for the record, member K will be abstaining from item 9G. She is abstaining because she did not initially vote on this agenda item in January. She was not present for the board meeting. With that, Bali, please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President and members of the board. I will keep my comments brief. You heard from Mr. Levinson earlier about his rehabilitation, the crime that he committed 10 years ago, and his efforts now to become a teacher. We are asking the board to review its previous decision, which barred Mr. Levinson from reapplying for a period of 5 years, down to a more reasonable review period of down to 3 years. And, I think we asked this for several reasons. And our argument really is that's an excessive penalty. If Mr. Levinson was not allowed to reapply for 5 years, that would really have been 15 years from the time that he committed a crime. He's had a immense amount of rehabilitation, education, kind of commitment to being a productive, law-abiding citizen and contributing community member. And that's a great amount of time in which for him to reapply. And the system really has safeguards in place in terms of the application system, in terms of the reduction for time where he can reapply. Mr. Levinson would still have to reapply. He would still have to, disclose what happened in the previous, in his previous crime. The board would get to consider his application anew, consider whether he was, how he was doing in the community, and his suitability for the teaching profession. So I think because of those safeguards that are in place, that the board can feel comfortable that if there's any changes in his behavior or in the trajectory of his life, that the board would have an opportunity to review that when his application was put anew. And, I just say kind of from a public policy perspective, I think there are good reasons why a conviction of this sort should not be a lifetime bar to trying to serve the community and re-enter the community as a teacher. One of the witnesses that spoke on behalf of John at his PPAC hearings talked about how John has used his experience, his crime, his indiscretion, and profound, grave mistake as kind of a launching point and a way of talking with kids that he coaches as a wrestling coach about, how their lives could be derailed, and, using it as a teaching moment. Because I think John used that moment to pivot 10 years ago. He has not had a single speeding ticket to his name since the day he was arrested. He has tried in earnest to do everything that society has asked him to do to make amends and to, rehabilitate himself. He's tenacious. He's going through this process. He's went through PPAC. He didn't take no for an answer when they rejected his application. He is sincere in his hope that he can become a teacher and a wrestling coach, which is why he continued to show up here, which I think shows his sincerity and dedication to the profession and his earnestness in how he's, laying it all out to bear for you and asking for a second chance. And I'm available for any questions about, what's happened in the past or Mr. Levinson.
Alicia, as I understand it, because we are in the agenda item itself, it is appropriate for members to ask counsel if there are any questions or concerns.
Correct. And I think I would recommend having the state provide their viewpoint on it first through Ms. Anderson. And then at that point, if the board members have any questions for either side, then that would be appropriate, Dr. Core.
I appreciate that guidance. So with that, I will turn it over to Kim Anderson, who I believe is, there she is. I see her. Gonna speak on behalf of the state, if you will. Go ahead, Kim.
Thank you, Dr. Core. Dr. Core, Madam Superintendent, members of the committee. While it is certainly within the discretion of this board to modify its decision, and in particular the penalty that was issued in this case, I'm not going to repeat everything in my pleading in response to the motion, but I do want to draw attention to a couple of things. One of them is that the evidence showed that it's the state's position that in preparation for the arson for profit scheme, that he made several false reports to the Tempe police that he was the victim of hate crimes. And then he conspired with the two acquaintances to burn down his residence and again portray himself as a victim of hate crimes. And I think that those actions leading up to or kind of setting the stage for the arson and that it was a hate crime, I think it was egregious actions in setting the stage for that. I think the counsel for Mr. Levinson makes a statement in their motion that this was not something that had an effect on anyone's lives, did not endanger anyone, when in fact the applicant knew that his actions could have effect on the lives and the belongings of his neighbors with whom he shared common walls from his townhouse. And the PPAC committee member specifically said to him, asked him, okay, so just to make it clear for me, you were at one point in time planning on burning and setting fire to your residence, knowing there were other people on either side of your residence who could have been harmed or would have lost, personal belongings, pets. And Mr. Levinson's answer was correct, yes. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Members of the board, are there any questions or comments for either members of council here? Okay, thank you. Then having reviewed Mr. Levinson's request for review of decision and the state's response, and having heard argument from both sides, do I have a motion to deny Mr. Levinson's request that this board review and modify the length of time for which he is prohibited from submitting an application for certification and affirm its January 25th, 2021 decision? Do I have such a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Member Ruiz, thank you. Do I have a second?
Dr. Core, that motion would fail with a lack of a second.
Correct. Yeah, thank you. That's where I was headed. So with, let me see what my second option is here. Then having reviewed Mr. Levinson's request and do a decision, do we walk me through this, Alicia? What's my option here?
Sure. So Vice President Core, if the board does not wish to affirm its January of 2021 decision, which was a denial of Mr. Levinson's application for a period of 5 years,
right?
And at this point, the board has the opportunity to modify the decision that they made in January, and they can keep it a denial. They could decide to approve it. If the board chooses to deny it, but they don't want 5 years and they want something less than 5 years, then the board would have to put that time frame within the denial. So Vice President Core, I would suggest that the board members have a discussion, a conversation of where each of them is thinking and get to a conclusion of what they would wish to do.
Always appreciate that, Director Williams. Appreciate that very much. So What are the thoughts of this board?
I can start, Dr. Kaur.
Yeah, Member Broussard, please.
So, I feel a little indecisive about this situation just because I do believe in second chances. It has been a good length of time, and he hasn't committed any other crimes. He seems to be remorseful and has done a lot to kind of set his life straight. However, then I'm very concerned at the disregard for potential human loss of life, and just disregard for care of, the care of a neighbor's property and pets and anything else that would have maybe been damaged. So because of, those, where I'm kind of waffling back and forth is we are always, when it comes down to it, what's best for the kids. And I appreciate the fact that we're not being asked necessarily to overturn the entire thing, and but possibly decrease the amount of time kind of softens that for me, because but ultimately we are responsible for keeping, students safe. And when I have doubts, I always err on the side, of conservative side as far as, well, I'm not really sure. So let's just wait and see. But I am thinking possibly a 3-year as opposed to a 5-year, as long as there are no additional issues that arise, because he will still, from what I understand, have to come for his application. Is that correct, Alicia? It'll still be reviewed prior to getting the application, even if we say 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, whatever it is.
Correct. So Vice President Corps Member Broussard, when an educator who has been previously disciplined by the State Board of Education goes to the certification desk at the department, those applications are automatically pulled and given to the investigative unit, in which they determine if anything else has happened stemmed from when the discipline took place. If there wasn't anything new, then we may just do a paper review. And then, I can't guarantee that this is how it would work, but this is just an idea of the process. It could be a paper review, and then we will close it and issue. However, this is not for this case, but for the record, I just want to be clear. If we're revoking for something that's like a very immoral and unprofessional conduct, that type of thing would automatically go through PPAC. So in this case, that's a little bit different, because we're not seeing that, more significant. I'm talking about some of the things that we typically see month to month that involve direct inappropriateness with students. Those are the type of things that would definitely have to go back through the process completely.
And one other comment is
Yep,
that, he's also secured a fingerprint clearance card, and has been working with students, and there hasn't been an issue. That's just my consideration. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Member Broussard. Other thoughts?
Vice President Kaur, I'd like to make a comment.
Yeah, please, Member Wellborn.
Members of the board, I would be in favor of granting, allowing for reapplication after a period of 3 years, in recognition that the Mr. Levinson has apparently done a lot of very good intentional work to correct the mistakes of his past. So I'd like to put that forth for a vote.
Okay, that's consistent with Member Broussard. So let me try to craft that do I have a motion after having reviewed the prior decision, modifies the January 25th, 2021 decision and denies Mr. Levinson's application for certification for a period of 3 years, modifying from 5 years? Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Member Wellborn, do I have a second?
I think it would make sense if I second that.
Fair enough, Member Broussard. So we're open to additional conversations. The motion on the floor right now is modifying the original decision from 5 years to 3 years. Any other comments or questions from any member? Okay, hearing none, I will call the vote. And again, we are modifying the January 25th, 2021 decision that denies Mr. Levinson's application for certification now for a period of 3 years. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign.
Nay.
This is Member Burton. Can I explain my vote?
Aye, please, absolutely.
So this is a difficult one for me, but I just think the decision of this board is also considered a safeguard. I know the lawyers said, there's safeguards in place, and I guess it seems like this is going to pass, but I mean, I probably would be more comfortable with 4 years. I guess in just the whole world of hate crimes, and the whole incident really troubled me. So I think 3 years is too lenient. So for that, I'm a no.
Vice President Corr, with a vote of 5-2, that motion fails.
Help me understand, Alicia, passes or fails?
That fails. The board needs 6 votes for any motion.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. I would have not have gotten that right. So do we continue conversation? Do we bring this issue back? Tell me where that leaves us.
So this is Member Burton. I would consider 4 years. I don't know if that's something.
Okay.
At this
I would
point.
second that.
Member Ruiz, please.
I would second that.
Okay, let me try that again then. And for clarity, do I have a motion?
Wait, Vice President Corr, I
Yeah.
would recommend that, since Member Burton has stated that she would support 4 years and Member Ruiz has said that he would support 4 years, let's get a pulse on the other board members to determine if they would also support 4 years prior to calling a motion.
Okay.
Right. This is
Yeah, Member Wellborn, please.
Can I ask a question? I can't tell from the Zoom call, how many members are on this call? How many votes are possible?
Possible, there's 8.
So we had an abstain.
I'm sorry, 7, because Member K is abstaining. Member Baker is no longer on the call. President Narducci did not join at all today, and neither did Member Robbins.
So how many, we have 6 eligible votes?
The board, because we're a board of 11, we always need 6 votes, no matter the quorum number.
And so, and again, you're saying there's 6 people eligible to vote now?
Correct.
So we
There's
have
7.
So we need a unanimous decision.
I'm sorry, Member Wellborn?
So those who are voting, we need a unanimous decision.
Wait, don't we have 7?
We have 7. Yeah, let me jump in here. We have 7 eligible votes right now, Member Wellborn. So any motion would need to carry 6 of the 7.
Thank you.
Other thoughts about the or conversation revolving around a 4-year time period?
This is Superintendent Hoffman.
Please go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you, Vice President, quorum, board members. I have a question, and perhaps this would go to council. Could I just hear an overview of the timeline from, hearing from the crime, the conviction was 13 years ago, and then there was a university degree completion. If I could just hear a little bit more of a sequence of timeline, I think that would help me to understand Mr. Levinson's history around pursuing a teaching degree and how lenient I'm feeling.
Certainly. Thank you for your question. And I can probably address the hate crime issue too. Mr. Levinson was arrested over 10 years ago. And so he, by the time the process played itself out and he pled guilty, so he accepted responsibility for his crime, and he, paid his debt. He had to go spend some time in jail, which he did. When he was in jail, he reactivated his education. He immediately started taking classes again because he had dropped out of community college before his arrest. And so after, as soon as he was released, he was on probation. He had requirements that he had to do for probation, including counseling, and he did those. While he was in jail, he started his education, and he continued doing that as soon as he was released. And so he transferred eventually to ASU, where he was able to get his bachelor's in geography, which is the subject that he seeks to teach. And he had some really formative experiences as a student, including going to Nepal and building wells for the farmers there who work in extremely arid conditions. So he did that. And he also was able to connect with several educators that were important to him and helped him kind of move forward and think that he was redeemable and that there was still good that he could do in his life, that he, he had options and he could do something. And so that, the journey has been a while, and he applied for his teaching application, I think back in October of 2019, I think is when he applied. So the process has taken us, till now, but it's taken a while. And before he was able to even apply for a certification, he had to apply for his level 1 fingerprint card through DPS. And that also actually had to go to a hearing, and he had to show his rehabilitation and the steps that he had taken in order to get a good cause exception for that level 1 fingerprint card. And so after a hearing through in front of an administrative law judge, the judge granted him his card. So Mr. Levinson has had to go through multiple steps because of his previous felony conviction to kind of even get to the point where he was able to apply for his teaching certificate. And I can talk to or speak to the hate crime aspect of this, because I know that it probably jumps off the page and Mr. Levinson is aware of that. Mr. Levinson himself is Jewish. He faked, hate crime that had kind of piggybacked off something that someone had actually done to him, and reported it falsely to the Tempe Police Department. He, as part of his PPAC submission, we included a letter from his rabbi, because John is involved in his religious community, and this is something that he had to reckon with that community about what he had done. And I, in terms of his crime, John doesn't dispute any of the facts, but it was a while ago. It felt like a different lifetime to him. And in terms of, whether his neighbors or his pets would be harmed, John abandoned this crime, that there's no question about it, that, in terms of talking with his buddies about this, who, those people he has completely severed ties with and moved on from, the plan never came to fruition. It was abandoned. No one was ever harmed or put in harm's way. And so I think the question that was posed to him at the hearing, John was trying to answer earnestly and not hide anything and just lay it all out bare. But I do want to say that the insurance scheme that he pled guilty to was just a scheme. It never came to fruition. And I think that's an important fact. And John doesn't dispute the facts of what he did. He's embarrassed, he's ashamed, he can't even believe that that's what he did 10 years ago, but he did. He's stuck with it. He's stuck with what he did. And so now in the past 10 years, he's been trying to do what he can to move forward from that moment in time, and trying to make a life where that's not the singular moment.
Right. Thank you.
Sorry. What?
Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Kaur.
No worries. Other questions or comments or thoughts?
Well, Vice President Kaur, really quickly, board members, for me, hearing that, like I am still pretty committed to the 3-year proposal that I know we just voted on and failed. But so I am not in support of going to 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Vice President Kaur, members, I could go to the 4-year.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. Any other thoughts?
Vice President Kaur.
Please, Member Ruiz.
Yeah, Vice President Kaur, Superintendent Hoffman, and members. Yeah, over my lifetime, I've dealt with lots of friends, family, just living in my neighborhood, people who have committed crimes and try to deal with it in their lives. And one of the things I've always tried to counsel is you have to own what you did. And, within that, you look for leniency. And, that's why, okay, I'm willing to go from 5 to 4. But there's also a value and there's a peace that you find when you accept the pain, and then you also accept the punishment. And, we don't know all the details. Why didn't it happen? Maybe he just got caught. I don't know. Maybe somebody ratted him out. I don't know. Don't know enough details here, but this is not just regular. Just you had the intent to burn a building where other people live close by. And I know you do some things that are young and dumb, but then there are just some things that you're just going to have to accept the fact that you did something really horribly wrong. And there's a punishment that comes with that. And we don't like the punishment in our lifetimes, but sometimes that portion is what is most redemptive. It probably will bring us the most peace in our life to accept that. This doesn't bar him from working among young people, just bars him from being a teacher. And, if you can find some place that would hire him as a teacher's aide or something but there is punishment, and that's the hard part to accept. And I hope that the young man is able to find peace at the end of all this and own what he did, find peace with it, move on with his life and be successful with what's left of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ruiz. Any other member with a desire to make a comment? Then hearing none, allow me to try to, again, capture the question before us.
Yes, Dr. Kaur, before you do that, sorry. Yes. Let's just do, after the motion in the second, let's do a roll call vote, okay?
I think that was very much called for. Excellent. So let me try to craft a motion and see if such a motion will be made in a second. Do I have a motion after having reviewed the prior decision and modified the January 25th, 2021 decision and deny Mr. Levinson's application for certification for a period of 4 years? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Burton, do I have a second?
Second.
Member Ruiz. And Alicia, I will take you up on the offer of conducting a roll call vote on this question.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Member Broussard.
I'd like to just explain my vote. So I will support this motion, but I would have preferred 3 years, and in the absence of, that vote passing, then I will vote for 4.
Thank you, Member Broussard. Dr. Kaur.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Dr. Kaur. Superintendent Hoffman.
I'd also like to explain my vote briefly, that I'm along the same lines of what Member Broussard said, that I would have preferred 3 years as well. And also because this is for a crime that was planned but never actually committed, like the actual, what he had planned to do was not actually followed through on. So I would have also preferred for 3 years, but for the sake of being a strong board, unified, I will vote yes.
Thank you, Superintendent Hoffman. Dr. Mack.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Mack. Member Wellborn.
I vote yes, but I'm also in agreement with Member Hoffman and Member Broussard with regard, my preference was for voting for approving 3 years, but for the sake of getting a vote approved by the board, I will go with the 4.
Thank you, Member Wellborn. Member Ruiz.
Aye.
Thank you, Member Ruiz. Member Burton.
Aye.
Thank you, Member Burton. Dr. Kaur, with a vote of 7-0, the 4-year denial, it does pass.
Thank you for your guidance there, Director Williams, and thank you to council for joining us from both sides. I appreciate your time here this morning. Motion carries, and we'll move on to 9H, which is the presentation, discussion, and possible action regarding the request for rehearing or review of Marjorie Nelson.
Yes, Dr. Kaur, item 9H was a request from Ms. Nelson for a rehearing or review of her case. Ms. Nelson is not here to speak on her behalf today. You do have in your records her letter, and you have the state's response to her motion for rehearing. Since Ms. Nelson is not here, I can try to answer any questions board members may have. Kathleen Harrington, who represented us in the state in this matter, is also on the call.
Members, having reviewed the material sent to us, again, we don't have Ms. Nelson here with us, but having reviewed the materials, any questions, comments, or concerns?
And Dr. Kaur, just to clarify, the board again has 2 options. The board may grant review of the decision and affirm or modify the previous decision, or the board may deny the request for review and affirm the previous decision.
Thank you, Director Williams. Having reviewed Ms. Nelson's request for review of the decision, as well as the state's response, do I have a motion to deny Ms. Nelson's request for a rehearing and affirm its January 25th, 2021 decision and revoke the certificates of Ms. Nelson for a period of 5 years? Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Member Broussard, thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Member Wellborn, thank you very much. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. We really do need our president and lawyer back for those complicated agenda items. I fear I bollocksed them up fairly severely, but I appreciate everyone's patience. As well as Director Williams's guidance through that process. Not my forte at all. So that moves us on to item 10, a summary of current events, future meeting dates, and items for future agendas. Does anyone else have anything to share? Go ahead.
Dr. Carr, I just want, for the record, I just want to, because I forgot, Member K also abstained from item 9H because she was not present for the January board meeting where the initial decision was made. Just
Thank
for the
you
record.
so much, and I appreciate your diligence in that matter. Member K, to recuse yourself. Appreciate that.
So Vice President Corr, for item 10, one thing that I think the board should recognize and know is that board staff is working on a way to get the board to be in person. There are some state regulations when it comes to state agencies that we do have to follow because we are a state agency. But board staff has been in the process of reaching out and trying to order certain supplies and whatnot that we need so that we can have a safe in-person board meeting. So hopefully we'll be able to have one of those sooner rather than later. I do know Member Ruiz had a comment in regard to Miss Jenny Clark's request to speak. Just a reminder to Member Ruiz, it's a tricky thing. You can direct staff to study the matter. You can respond to any criticism, or you can request that the president put it on a future board agenda.
Got it. Mr. Vice President, Superintendent Hoffman, and members, I think I would ask maybe to take a look at a little bit more about some of the questions on the ESA and the insurance area. And I always believe that parents are the first teachers, the best teachers. And if there's not a prohibition to this, then at least it should be studied more and see what the possibilities. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Ruiz. Board staff will do that. Not a problem.
Any other comments or announcements? Well, with that, I will call this meeting to a close at 12:23, and wish you all the very best, and appreciate your work here today as always. Be well and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.